Hi and welcome to Northern Illawarra Uniting Church Sermon Online. My name's Nerrida Miller and I'm filling in for Josh, who's having a well-earned break, a holiday right now. This is the season, the church season of Epiphany. And Epiphany is a season that involves light. So some people, you might have heard the expression, some people have had an epiphany experience. That is a light experience where they've discovered something new. Now in this season, we're called to come close to God and to learn a little bit more about him. And in this season, normally, we have the three wise men following the star, the light, and coming to the stable and going home a different way. Because when we come to Jesus Christ, we're changed, transformed, and we go a different way. Also within this season, we have Jesus being baptised, and we hear the voice of God saying, and from the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased," clearly identifying who Jesus is. And at the end of Epiphany, we have the Transfiguration, where Jesus is on the mountain with Elijah and with Moses, and again we hear God's voice. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." But today in this season of Epiphany, the second week of Epiphany, we are going to hear Jesus calling some of his disciples. We're going to hear from one of his disciples already called Philip, who invites a friend, Nathanael, to come and discover the one that he has discovered, the one that's been promised, the Son of God. We hear a skeptic. We hear Nathanael being very skeptical, but we'll see what happens here when he too has this epiphany and it discovers who Jesus really is. Let me read that to you from John 1, 43 to 51. Jesus calls Philip and Nathanael. The next day, Jesus decided to leave Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the book of law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," Philip said. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. And Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were sitting under the fig tree, before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." And then he added, "Verily I say to tell you, that you will see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." So there are two aspects of this reading that I want us to have a look at today. And they are just in three words: come and see. Come and see. And the first part of this is, I believe it's an invitation to each one of us to come daily into God's presence, to come and see what Jesus is about, to come and hear the kind of things that he did and read the kind of things that he said, because that is life-changing. And the second part of this reading is really a missional aspect. That is that Philip invites Nathanael to come and see for himself. And when we have experience discovering who Jesus is, then there's a reliance upon us to invite others to come and see for ourselves. And you know, when we do come to Jesus, we come to God, and we discover more about Jesus, we discover more about ourselves. We discover who we really are. We know our purpose in life, and we discover life in all its fullness. I don't know if you've ever been invited to come and see something, to come and experience something that perhaps you hadn't experienced before. I really enjoy skiing, snow skiing. In fact, for the last quite a few years, we've been skiing in Japan. And one of the reasons that we go to Japan is that there's quite a lot of powder. And it's wonderful skiing through the powder. It lifts you up, it's light, it's a little bit like surfing, and it's like skiing on air. Well, sometimes to get the powder, you have to go into the trees, because it often gets skied off on the main tracks. And I have a friend that we've been skiing with for quite some time, and from time to time he disappears for half an hour, and he'll come back out and he'll say, "Oh, I've got a great track. It's through the trees. Come on in and experience the powder. And I then have to make a decision. Do I go in and experience the powder, knowing that's why I came, and knowing that it'll be great in there, or do I sit back and consider the risks? Of course I have to consider the risks, but it's so good in there. And I don't mind hugging a tree, but I certainly don't like hugging a tree at speed. The reason I go in and follow is that my friend has been in before me and has actually found a route through the trees that would be safe. And I can follow. I don't have to actually cut that track by myself. And so in I go, and I have a great experience skiing in the trees, in the powder. That's why I go. And it's a little bit like, that example's a little bit like the context of our reading today. Jesus has called Andrew for his disciple. He's called Peter, and he's called Philip. Now, Philip has discovered who Jesus really is. And so he comes to Nathanael and he says, I've found the one that the scriptures are writing about. I know that the Messiah has come. And he says to Nathanael, come and have a look. Now, unfortunately, cold water gets spread on that discovery because Nathanael is completely sceptical. He says, no way. How can anything good come out of a small hip town like Nazareth? He won't have a bar of it. So here we've got Philip enthusiastically sharing and enthusiastically inviting Nathanael to come and experience what he has experienced, and Nathanael says, no way, it's not going to happen. Judges the book by the cover, if you want to put it that way. But the interesting thing here is that Philip doesn't get into an argument. He doesn't get into a philosophical argument or a spiritual argument about why Jesus is the Son of God. He simply says to Nathanael, come and see. And Nathanael, to his credit, does go and see, and Jesus does the rest. Because when Nathanael comes to Jesus, Jesus says to him, you're a true Israelite. He's respecting the fact that Nathanael isn't taking anything for granted. He has to discover this for himself. In fact, he doesn't bawl Nathanael out for not believing that he's the Son of God. He simply says, I know that you talk it like it is. I know you say it like it is, and at this stage you're not believing who I am. But he goes on then, and he says to Nathanael, because I know you and you're a really honest, kind of down-to-earth person, Nathanael gets a shock and says to Jesus, well, how do you know me? How is it that you know anything about me? And Jesus goes a step further, and he says, Nathanael, I saw you before Philip called you sitting under the fig tree. Now, this shocks Nathanael even more. How could Jesus have known what was happening before he even came to Jesus? Well, there's something about the fig tree that's important in terms of Jewish history. It's a place of comfort. It's a place where there's food. It's a place where there's shade. And so what Jesus is really saying to Nathanael is, not only am I telling you all about yourself because I know you inside out, but I'm telling you that you've been sitting comfortably under the fig tree where there's no challenge. And all of a sudden, there's this transformation. If you like, there's this epiphany that suddenly Nathanael discovers who Jesus is in his presence. And note what he calls him. He says, Rabbi, teacher, Son of God, and King of Israel. And so this is a complete transformation from one who thinks nothing good can come out of Nazareth, but in Jesus' presence, he discovers who Jesus really is. And he joins that community. And to join a community of faith is a very comforting thing, although it's a challenging thing also. To join a community of faith where people have the same beliefs, core beliefs as you, where people are on a mission, where there's support and love for each other, where people will help each other, where people know the grace of God. That's the kind of community now that Nathanael has joined. But Jesus goes on and he says, just because you've discovered who I am, it doesn't mean that that's the end of it. And he promises Nathanael a promise that's an interesting promise to think about. He promises him that he will see even greater things. He'll see angels coming from heaven to earth in God's presence. And this refers back to Jacob. Jacob, from the Old Testament, that because Nathaniel would have known about, Jacob was running away from his brother Esau. He'd stolen his birthright and he was taking off because he was in big trouble and Esau was after him. And he lies down that night to go to sleep, puts his head on a stone, and he has a dream. And in the dream he sees angels coming from heaven to earth and back again. And when he wakes up, he has an epiphany. He says, surely God is in this place. Even though I've stolen the birthright, right, even though I'm running away, God is with me. And so he discovers God in this place. And so what Jesus is saying to Nathaniel is that if he continues to be present with him, he will have this thin place where heaven and earth join together. And that's the promise to us too. If we come and see, and we sit in God's presence, then there is a thin place. There is a thin place in God's presence where we know the presence of God, where we know the love of God, the grace of God. Sometimes it's a challenge, sometimes it's comfort, but it's a thin place where heaven and earth come together. And this is the promise that Jesus gives to Nathaniel. And so as we think about this second week in Epiphany, and we think about this reading and how it applies to us directly, let's remember the words come and see. And I'm going to suggest to you that this is a real challenge to us, that each day, if we come into God's presence and we spend time with God, we will see so much more about the one in whom we have faith. We'll discover so much more about ourselves. We will find life in all its fullness if we will but come and see. Because when we come and see, that's that thin place. When we sit before God in his presence, when we know the love of Jesus in our life, that's the thin place where heaven and earth are joined together. And there's a challenge in this too, because when we discover something this important and this valuable to our life, then we want to share it. And just as Philip wanted to share with Nathaniel, then we can invite others to come and see also. Not to argue with them, not to try and necessarily present a case, but invite them into God's presence so they too can come and see. And in that experience, there's the epiphany of discovering who God is and who Jesus is. And that's what makes all the difference. Go out this week, come and see for yourself. Go out with the challenge to invite others to come and see what you've discovered. Go in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.